Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel and welcome to all my new followers. When we look at the lens of a camera, there are certain characteristics which we all seem to collectively covet. Sharpness, character, nice painterly bokeh, and generally the very well-built properties of an all-metal construction. All of these are to be found in the wonderful Hexanon 50mm 1.8, which so beautifully adorns the Konica IIIA fixed lens rangefinder camera. With its sharpness second to none, its ever so pleasing out of focus softness, and eye-pleasing glare when shot straight into the sun, this lovely little all-metal shooter of a lens sports tons of character in combination with excellent image and build quality. There is a reason that Konica IIIA added the phrase, "The lens alone is worth it," to the original advertisement of this wonderful little shooter. In the 1950s, Konica IIIA, not yet known as Konica, were known for producing high-end fixed lens rangefinders. Their lenses sported their very well-known amber-colored single coating, enabling the lenses to produce fine contrast in black and white, plus great natural color reproduction when shooting color photography, which was then still in its infancy. This Hexanon is of a 6-lens in 5 groups, double gauze design, giving it its specific character only found in upper-tier glass lenses, which often cost 10 times as much as this wonderful little shooter. It has a very smooth and ever so softly dampened focusing ring, which focuses from 1 meter to infinity and has an aperture ranging from 1.8 all the way down to f/22. I know, specs on paper are just that, specs on paper. So let's go through some photos to show you what this amazing little shooter is all about. As you can see, this lens is phenomenally sharp. We're going to go through 5 color images and 5 black and white images so I can sort of show you those characteristics and why I just love this lens so much. This first image, this is Kodak Pro Image 100. I would say, right now my absolute favorite color film. We can see the excellent sharpness. You can see that here in bar. Even zoomed in, even scanned with the Epson V550, we can see excellent sharpness with this lens. Now, when I talk about a coating of a lens, what I want a coating to do is definitely not overly affect the color when I shoot color photography. I want it to give me a natural color reproduction so I have some wiggle room later in post. And that's exactly what this lens does. It provides sharpness, it provides accurate color reproduction, and it gives me that wiggle room that I need later in post in a TIFF file to correct a little bit of color here and there. I don't have to correct a whole heck of a lot with this lens. And color is definitely also highly related to which film that you use. But here we can see the excellent sharpness while still retaining that film look. And this is 35mm. And I deliberately, of course, chose a shot with reds in there. You can see the beautiful reproduction of red. I don't do a whole heck of a lot. After I scan, I will import into Photoshop where I'll do an auto contrast. And I will do a white balance correction, and that is it. And a sharpening, of course. In the second shot, again, Kodak Pro Image 100, we can see excellent sharpness, beautiful color reproduction. You don't have to do a heck of a lot. Again, even zoomed in with the Epson V550, there is wonderful sharpness, excellent color reproduction. I would have no issue whatsoever having this printed, even all the way up to 20 by 30, 12 by 18. It would look amazing. This lens just does exactly what you want a lens to do. Give me sharpness, give me natural colors, and give me a little bit of character. And we'll get into that character in a minute. But here you can kind of already see it. But not give me overly, don't overcook the contrast to where later on I have to pull that back. It's like food. You can add a little bit of salt in the beginning, but it's better to add a little bit of salt later versus, oh wow, this is there's too much salt in it. If that is an analogy you can follow me with. But that's what this lens does. It's not overly done. You can add a little bit of contrast later. You can play with the colors. There's wiggle room there. That's really what I want out of a lens. And this camera, this lens is fantastic. Here, third shot, when we talk about character and the flare, I love that flare. You definitely get flare. Nowadays, what people want in a lens is absolutely no flare, no vignetting, no chromatic aberration, no nothing. The lenses have to be clinical, and the aesthetic is so clean. That's not what I'm after in my photography. I want to see some flare, as long as the minimum level of sharpness is there and natural color reproduction, I'm happy. Nowadays, lenses are just overcooked. This lens isn't that. There's beautiful glare here. This is straight into the sun. And yes, is it going to take away just a little bit of contrast? But that's not what I care about. It's just beautiful character here. Wonderful shot. Sharpness is excellent. And again, still in the blues, wonderfully, naturally reproduced. Again, Kodak Pro Image 100, my favorite film. That's really what I've been shooting lately. Really in love with that film. All color shots are going to be shot on that film here. Here we see a portrait, and look at the sharpness. What more sharpness in 35mm do you want? We still see a pleasing amount of grain. Yes, you can get a little bit sharpener with a Kodak Portra 160, but again, that is not the look that I'm after. I still want to see a little bit of grain. I want to see a little bit of the film look. And where Kodak Pro Image 100 blows Portra out of the water is in the underexposed dark areas. Of course, you can get any film to go muddy, but this film goes muddy a lot later than Portra. Believe it or not, you can do your tests. And that's what I love about this film. We're not talking about this film now per se, but the darker areas, you don't necessarily have to worry about those too much. But wonderful portrait, wonderful sharpness. Here we can kind of a little bit see the softness and the wonderful sort of painterly aspect of the out of focus areas. But you will definitely see that in this next shot here. Look how beautiful and painterly. Number one, the gentleman is sharp and wonderful color reproduction, natural. This is exactly how I remember it was, but look how beautiful and painterly. Look how wonderful it's done. And of course, there's a lawnmower coming by. I do apologize, guys, if you hear that, but so wonderful and painterly and just wonderful. That bokeh is delicious. All right, guys, moving on to the 5 black and white shots. This is Pen F50. I think all the rest is that you'll see is Ilford FP100, but Pen F50, wonderful shot. Again, Pen F50 is known for having a lot of contrast, but this lens allows me to add even just a little bit of contrast after that. Pen F50 scans in just a tiny bit flatter, which I like. I don't want to have a lens that puts so much contrast in there that, the highlights are going to be blown. I have to try to rein that in Lightroom afterwards. That's not what I want. I want to be able to just add a touch of contrast to my liking, and you can see that. And again, the excellent sharpness, fantastic sharpness, even though this is a shot a little further away. What more sharpness do you want out of 35mm? We're not, 35mm, You're not going to print 20 by 30. You're going to print 12 by 18, which is, again, in my opinion, the sweet spot. Whatever you want to print on, to each their own. You can certainly go a bit higher, but this is, I can't wish anything more out of a lens than this Hexanon 51.8 on the Konica IIIA. Next shot, although I did miss the focus just a little bit on his eyes, you can again see the wonderful sharpness. A portrait of this gentleman who allowed me to take a portrait of him, kind of a drifter type person, but again that softness, just pleasing, painterly type, out of focus areas, which you're gonna nowadays have to spend quite a few of your hard-earned dollars in order to get that same type painterly backdrop. We're talking at least, $1,000, if not more, to get that sort of pleasing type backdrop. Of course, there's going to be people that are going to criticize anything and everything, and that's perfectly fine, to each their own. You might not like it. I personally love it. Tons of character, to have that sharpness, and then the out of focus areas. Of course, with this lens, since the minimum focus distance is 1 meter, you do have to make sure that you have plenty of distance between your subject and the backdrop in order to get that out of there. With SLRs, the minimum focus distance is usually about 45 centimeters, 0.45 meters, which you can go closer and you don't have to distance yourself or distance the subject from the background that far. But if you catch it right, beautiful bokeh or bokeh, however you want to pronounce it. And that doesn't really have any influence on the picture now, does it? This was more of a test shot. I wanted to see what I focused on the center pillow of the couch. Again, beautiful out of focus areas, beautiful out of focus in front of the pillow, but sharpness exactly where you need it. And again, sharpness isn't the end all be all, but now that I've shot with this camera and this lens, it's become the standard for me. I don't want to have any sort of less quality. And honestly, and I feel so bad for my FA because it hasn't seen a whole heck of a lot of use. And even though this camera doesn't have a light meter, which initially I thought was going to hold me back, which it doesn't at all. And I'll explain that in the review, the actual review of the Konica IIIA that I'm going to do. But it's been just such a pleasure shooting with that Konica. The prices are already creeping up just a little bit, and I'm sure some of my videos are contributing to that. But these cameras are absolute Leica alternatives and worthy of that status. Next shot here, guys, because I don't want to bore you too long. Again, excellent sharpness. Ilford FP FP plus 125 here. Excellent sharpness, beautiful contrast, even on a more contrasty sunny day. What else do you want out of a lens? It still has that film look. On black and white, it just retains such a beautiful classic black and white film look. Again, that I'm now hesitant to shoot anything else. This camera has become my daily driver for documenting daily life, bringing it with me everywhere, also for some more serious work, being out there, taking portraits of people when I'm out and about. And again, and this shot shows so beautifully why I love this lens, because of the contrast, the sharpness, the out of focus areas, all that kind of stuff. Last shot here of my girlfriend Jamie. And this is a deliberate test here where I tested wide open. Yes, it becomes just a tad more soft, but nothing to the extent where you would say like, oh, it's not usable anymore. like any lens, becomes just a little bit more soft wide open. But look at there's no vignetting. And this is wide open at its 1.8 setting. And still, if you look at her eye, we still have excellent sharpness. And mind you, again, we're scanning with the Epson V550. I'm working on a setup to scan with my DSLR, and I cannot wait to see how much additional sharpness I can get out of this, out of these negatives that I shot with the Konica IIIA. Wide open, its bokeh does become a little busy. You do want to stop down to an f2.8 or an f4, even an f8, but it's still usable. You can shoot these lenses wide open and have an absolutely, I mean, this is more than usable. You could up the sharpness a little bit in Photoshop, and that's handheld. I believe I was shooting at a 50th of a second, which is also really beautiful. It's a 50mm lens, and then instead of having a 60th of a shutter speed, it has a 50th. Isn't that? These Japanese guys, they thought of everything back then. But guys, if you are in the market, and let me move my microphone. If you are in the market for a high-end, fixed lens rangefinder, the Konica IIIA, I would recommend it in a New York heartbeat. Guys, I hope you learned something from this episode. I love you, and I'll see you in the next one.